I didn't go into San Juan National Forest looking for ghosts. That's what I always tell people when they ask why I still camp alone. Why I still drive my old Volkswagen through back roads where even the maps start to stutter. Why I still trust my gut, even when it nearly got me killed. I wasn't out there chasing myths or chasing death. I was chasing silence, the kind that feels like redemption. It was late September when I made my way into Colorado's southwest, somewhere past Durango, but not yet in the deep folds of the Weminuche wilderness. I'd been traveling solo for weeks by then, just me and the VW, a 1979 Westphalia I'd named Alice after my grandmother. Her curtains were faded, her cabinets creaked, and if you didn't hold the gear shift just right, she'd kick like a mule on startup. But she was mine. Every dent, every patch of rust on her pop top told a story I hadn't fully lived until I hit the road. San Juan had been a bucket list stop, remote, beautiful, and supposedly peaceful. But from the moment I crossed that forest boundary sign, something felt off. Not wrong, just slightly misaligned, like a picture frame hung a degree too far left. I passed through a thinning patch of aspens that shimmered gold like they were on fire, their leaves whispering secrets too old for my ears. Then the forest swallowed me whole. Pines closed in on both sides, casting long, crooked shadows even in daylight. I told myself it was just elevation messing with my equilibrium. Or maybe I was tired, but I couldn't shake the sensation that something was watching me. Not malicious, not yet, just curious. Patient. I pulled into a primitive campsite by a small, still lake, the kind of place that doesn't show up on tourist maps but lives in the back pockets of locals. The water didn't move, not a ripple. Even when the wind picked up and tossed pine needles across the surface like confetti, the lake held its breath. There was one other van there, a dusty red Sprinter with faded plates from Arizona. It was parked crooked near the tree line, its doors shut, windows half covered with reflective insulation. I waited for a sign of life. Smoke, movement, anything. But it just sat there, inert like it had grown roots. I gave a polite nod toward it anyway, just in case someone was watching from behind the glass. I set up camp, lit a small fire, and made a sandwich. Something in the bread tasted stale, but I was too tired to care. The smell of pine and old smoke hung in the air, mixing with the faint metallic scent of cold. I sat under the canopy of stars and let the chill settle into my bones. Nights in San Juan fall fast, and once the sun ducked behind the peaks, the forest exhaled. That's when I first heard it, a soft clicking sound, like someone knocking lightly on wood. 4 taps. Pause. 4 more. Then silence. I looked around, expecting to see the owner of the red van maybe gathering firewood or just making their presence known, but there was nothing. No footsteps, no crunch of twigs, just the cold press of air and the rhythmic tapping echoing again, this time fainter, like it came from deeper in the woods. I stood up, listening harder. 4 taps. Pause. 4 more. It wasn't a woodpecker. I know that sound. This was deliberate. Too slow. Too human. I grabbed my flashlight, swept the tree line. Nothing. I told myself it was probably a branch swaying and hitting another, just the wind playing tricks. And that made it easier to crawl into Alice for the night. But once inside, I noticed something strange. My dashboard clock was blinking like it had reset. It's an analog model. No reason to flicker unless the battery had been pulled. I checked the lights, still working. Engine turned over fine, then I heard it again. 4 taps. Right outside the sliding door this time. I froze. Didn't breathe. Didn't move. Tap, 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 tap. I looked through the curtain, expecting to see a face, a hand, anything. But there was nothing. Just the empty air between me and the lake. The red Sprinter still as stone under the moonlight. I debated stepping outside. Every cell in my body screamed against it. But I'm not the kind of person who lets fear dictate truth. I grabbed the flashlight, gripped the handle, counted to 3, and slid the door open. Silence. No taps. No footsteps. Just the brittle crunch of leaves beneath my boots. I circled Alice once, light scanning the ground. There were no footprints, not even mine from earlier. Just undisturbed pine needles and that oppressive quiet. I aimed my beam toward the red van, still no sign of life. I walked closer. As I neared it, I noticed the side door was slightly ajar, not open, just enough of a crack to break the seal. I called out, "Hey, everything all right in there?" No response. The smell hit me before I got any closer, like sour meat left out in the sun. Rancid, wet, my stomach turned. I don't know what possessed me to pull the door fully open. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was some misplaced sense of responsibility. Maybe, deep down, I was already beginning to suspect that something wasn't right in these woods, that something had gone quiet for too long. The inside of the van was empty. No bedding, no gear, no food. Just an old flannel jacket slung across the passenger seat and a small pile of pine cones in the middle of the floor. Pine cones, neatly stacked, almost ceremonially. I backed away, slowly. As I turned to leave, I noticed something carved into the van's back panel, just above the taillight, barely visible in the moonlight, but there, scratched in with something dull, jagged. Not, "I don't sleep here." We. That pronoun clung to me all the way back to Alice, crawling under my skin like ice water. I locked the doors, double-checked them, shut every window, curtains drawn tight. I didn't sleep that night, not really. Just drifted in and out, heart thrumming every time the wind rustled too close to the van. And all through the night, I never heard the taps again, not once, which somehow made it worse. Dawn in the forest should bring relief. That subtle shift in the light, the hush before the birds dare to break the silence, the warmth of the sun spilling through the trees like a soft apology for whatever came before. But not in San Juan. Not that morning. The sun rose like it was afraid of what it might reveal. I slid open Alice's door and stepped into air that still felt wrong. The smell was different. Cleaner, yes, but sterile, like everything had been scrubbed of evidence. The red van was still there, parked where I left it, doors shut again. I hadn't closed them. I know that. But I didn't check. I couldn't. Some primal part of me told me to leave it alone. Whatever had happened in there, whatever those pine cones meant, whoever we was, it wasn't for me to solve. I packed up quickly. Didn't bother with breakfast. My hands trembled as I cranked the engine, half expecting it not to turn over. But Alice, loyal as ever, grumbled awake like she knew I needed her to be strong. I didn't drive out immediately. Not yet. I should have. I know that now. But there's something about fear that messes with your pride. I told myself I was being dramatic, that the night had played tricks on me, that maybe the tapping was a dream, that the red van belonged to someone who simply walked off into the woods for a sunrise hike. I needed to believe that, because the alternative meant I had no control, and I couldn't sit with that. So instead of leaving, I drove deeper, south, toward an old forest road I'd read about on a forum, barely maintained, rarely used, but apparently leading to a high-elevation meadow where elk sometimes gather at dusk. It sounded like the kind of solitude I needed to shake the night off. Clean air, big views, nothing but the sound of wind and the occasional cry of a hawk. The road was rough. Rutted dirt, tight turns, steep climbs. Alice moaned and lurched, but kept going. A few times I had to get out and clear fallen branches. At one point, I swore I saw something move in the trees, too large to be a deer, too silent to be a bear. But when I turned, nothing was there. Just the trees, leaning a little too close. Watching. Eventually, I reached the meadow. It was as beautiful as promised. Golden grasses swaying beneath jagged cliffs, the sky bruised with clouds. I parked Alice facing the view, killed the engine, and stepped out into the stillness. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was dead. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my own breath, the crunch of my boots. Even the wind seemed to hold back, like it didn't want to disturb whatever had claimed this place. I set out a small chair, poured some water, and tried to relax. I even laughed to myself, said aloud, "See? Nothing's out here. Just wilderness." That's when I noticed the trees on the far side of the clearing. They weren't moving right. At first, I thought it was just the way the branches swayed, a subtle syncopation, like a metronome off rhythm. But then I realized they weren't swaying at all. They were leaning, one by one, just a few inches, like something behind them was pushing gently against their trunks, not enough to break them, just enough to make them bow. Then the tapping returned. Not wood this time, metal. Tap, 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 tap. I whipped around. It was coming from Alice. I ran back, my breath shallow, heart clawing at my ribs. I half expected to see someone standing beside her, a figure, a shadow, anything. But there was nothing. And then I saw the pine cones, 2 of them, placed neatly on the roof of my van, balanced, perfect. I stood there locked in place, no sound, no wind, just the sharp whistle of blood in my ears and the sudden, undeniable truth. I was not alone out here. Not now, not last night, not ever. Someone or something was watching me, had been watching me, marking me. I don't remember getting into the driver's seat. I don't remember buckling in or turning the key. All I remember is the sound of tires slipping in the mud as I reversed too fast, fishtailed, then punched forward down the trail, branches slapping against the windshield like claws. I drove without direction, just away, away from the meadow, away from the tapping. I didn't care where the road led, I just needed it to lead out. But the forest didn't let go. The trail twisted back on itself, forked where no fork should be. At one point, I swear I passed the same fallen log twice. The same notch, the same scrape of red moss across its bark. I began to sweat, my knuckles pale on the steering wheel. And then I saw it, the red van, parked in the middle of the trail, like it had been waiting. Its back doors were open now, empty inside. More pine cones. But this time they weren't stacked, they were scattered, hurried, like something had dumped them in panic. I couldn't breathe. I reversed hard, tires digging into the dirt, then peeled off onto another path, barely wide enough for Alice. Branches screeched along her sides, gouging paint, snapping mirrors. But I didn't care. I drove until the light changed, until the shadows grew shorter and I could smell something different. Civilization, dust, smoke, the scent of safety. When I finally broke free of the forest and saw the distant glint of a county highway, I nearly cried. I pulled over into a turnout, shut off the engine, and sat there in silence. Then I looked at the roof. The pine cones were gone. I hadn't touched them. I didn't camp that night. Didn't eat, didn't turn on music or stretch out in the back like I usually do after a long drive. I just sat behind the wheel in a dusty lot near a gas station off the 160, staring out at nothing, listening to the low, uneven tick of Alice's engine as it cooled down. It was too quiet. Even here, even with a road nearby and trucks passing now and then, I couldn't shake the feeling that silence wasn't absence anymore. It had changed. It was presence. And it was inside me now. I slept in the driver's seat with one eye open. By morning, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. I needed to believe it, even if some corner of my mind knew better. So I did what people do when they're scared. I made a plan. I told myself I'd head north, maybe find a proper RV park with lights, electricity, noise, something human, something grounded. But then I made a mistake. A small one. Innocent, really. I stopped for breakfast. It was a roadside diner just outside Pagosa Springs. Cheap eggs, burned coffee, the kind of place where the waitresses call you Han whether they like you or not. I took a booth by the window, kept Alice in view, tried to act normal. When the waitress brought my check, she noticed my Colorado map spread out on the table. She smiled, leaned in a little, and said, "Looking for trails?" I told her I'd been camping in San Juan. Her smile flickered. "You up near Piedra?" she asked. I hesitated. "Somewhere around there," I said. Her eyes dropped to the floor for a second. "Not many folks go solo up that way." I nodded, said nothing. Then she added something that's stuck with me ever since. Simple. Offhand. But it changed everything. They say the forest doesn't keep secrets. It just waits for you to hear them. She cleared my plate, walked away, and never looked back. I left the diner without finishing my coffee. I don't know why I did it. Maybe some masochistic pull, maybe the way a wound demands to be touched. But I got back into Alice, stared at the map again, and found myself tracing the road back south. Not the same route. Not quite, but close. The road I chose was narrower, older, a mining road maybe. It cut deep between cliffs and followed a dry creek bed. Trees leaned in overhead like they'd been arguing and froze mid-sentence. And yet, I felt drawn to it, like something wanted me to see what I missed, or maybe wanted to finish what it started. About 3 miles in, I saw the sign. It was nailed crooked to a tree, the wood split and gray with rot. No overnight camping past this point. But someone had scratched something beneath the printed letters. Not with a marker, with something sharp. Not for you. I should have turned around right then, but I didn't. I kept driving. Alice sputtered once, then caught herself, like she was trying to warn me, and gave up. The road ended in a kind of natural bowl, a sunken clearing surrounded by granite walls, scattered boulders, and a stream that had long since dried up. The perfect acoustic trap. Every step, every breath echoed strangely, like the land was listening, not responding. I stepped out expecting the same eerie silence from before. But no. This place had sound. It buzzed, a low electrical hum, not mechanical, but bone deep, like standing too close to a power line, or inside the hum of your own skull. I walked the perimeter, took photos, tried to rationalize it. That's when I found the circle. Rocks, arranged carefully. Inside it, more pine cones, but older, wetter, mold growing up their sides like veins, dozens of them, placed in spirals, some broken, some blackened, all wrong. I stepped back fast, heart pounding. My boot hit something soft. I looked down, a glove. Not mine, weathered leather, small, probably a woman's. It was curled like someone had just taken their hand out of it and left it there. I picked it up without thinking, and then everything shifted. The wind died. The light bent, not dimmed, bent like it filtered through dirty glass. The air grew thick again, but this time it didn't just feel wrong. It felt aware. I dropped the glove, ran back to Alice, started the engine, and the tapping started again. Not from the outside, from underneath. 4 taps, pause, 4 more. Something was under the van. I couldn't breathe. I didn't look. I didn't check. I threw it in reverse, kicked up dust, and peeled out so hard I didn't notice the low scrape beneath the frame until I hit pavement 10 minutes later. When I stopped to look, nothing. No marks, no dents, just a single pine cone in the center of the road behind me. How it stayed there, how it hadn't bounced or rolled, I couldn't explain. But it stood like a marker, like a warning. I drove to a state campground that night. Paid extra for a site near the lights. The place was almost full. RVs, laughter, families grilling, dogs barking. I should have felt safe, but I didn't. Because when I opened my cabinet to grab a snack, nestled between a box of cereal and my propane stove, was the glove. That same glove. Still curled, still damp, still waiting. I didn't scream when I saw the glove. I just stood there, hand frozen on the edge of the cabinet, staring down at it like it was a memory that had decided to become real. Like it had followed me, hitched a ride inside some crack in the world I didn't see. I picked it up again. Same weight, same smell, same feeling like something inside it had just left. I turned it over, looking for a tag, initials, anything, but there was nothing. Just cracked leather and a faint indentation along the palm, the shape of fingers long gone. I walked it to the campground trash and dropped it in without ceremony. Then I walked back to Alice and drove to the other side of the campground, parked in a different slot, like that would somehow break the connection. But of course it didn't. Because connection wasn't the problem anymore. It was attachment. I slept fitfully, if you can call what I did sleep, twitching awake at the sound of gravel shifting outside, my brain convincing me there were footsteps where there were none. Every time a door slammed somewhere across the park, I jolted. I dreamed in flashes. Trees leaning in too close, voices speaking in a language that wasn't made of words, eyes in the rearview mirror that weren't mine. By morning, I was unraveling. I looked at myself in the visor mirror. Hollow eyes, jaw clenched, a red line across my cheek where I'd slept crooked against the seatbelt. I told myself I needed help. Not a mechanic, not a ranger. A real human voice who could anchor me back to the world that made sense. So I called my sister. She's a therapist in Portland, doesn't believe in ghosts, but believes in trauma, believes in the way the body remembers what the brain tries to erase. She answered on the third ring, groggy and concerned. "You okay?" she asked. And that's when I cracked. I told her everything. The taps, the pine cones, the red van, the glove. I told her about the silence that felt like a presence, the sound that buzzed inside my bones, the way the forest seemed to shift beneath me like a living thing. I expected her to tell me I needed sleep, a break, maybe a psych eval, but she didn't. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you remember Uncle Cal? I hadn't thought of him in years." "He used to talk about San Juan," she continued. Said there were places in that forest that were thin, like the world had scar tissue. He called them bruises in the earth, places where things leaked through. I laughed, short and sharp. "You think I found a bruise?" "I think something found you," she said softly. "You need to leave. You need to stop looking back." I wanted to argue, wanted to say it was just coincidence, stress, hallucination. But I couldn't, because I'd already made the next mistake. I'd already looked back. That day I drove north, didn't stop, didn't eat, just chased the clean lines of asphalt, ignoring the way the clouds seemed to follow me, the way shadows stretched longer than they should. I made it to a national park hours away and parked at the edge of a full campground surrounded by people. Families, dogs, light. I told myself I was safe now. I took a shower at the public station. I washed every inch of my skin like I was scrubbing off something invisible. I stood under the hot spray until it ran cold and my fingers shriveled. Then I dried off, got dressed, and opened the door to head back to Alice. But it wasn't Alice I saw first. It was a red van, parked 4 slots down, same make, same dents, same crooked back bumper. I froze. I turned, looked back toward the station, and that's when I saw the glove again. Not in the trash, not in my van, in my hand. Still wet. I dropped it, took a step back, and then I heard the breathing. Close, behind me. Not labored, not human. Deep, hollow. Like the forest itself was exhaling through lungs made of trees and time. I ran. Didn't think. Didn't grab anything. I ran back to Alice, threw open the door, started her in one try, and peeled out of the park while people watched with startled expressions and melting marshmallows in their hands. I drove until the road turned purple with dusk, until I found a wide pullout overlooking nothing but desert. No trees, no shadows, no forest, just empty space. That night, I parked in the center of that bare earth and set up a ring of lights. Every lantern, every flashlight, even my emergency flares. I made a perimeter. I dared the dark to cross it. And then I waited. No taps, no pine cones, just the wind. By midnight, I let myself believe I was finally alone. By 2, I started to relax. By 4, I fell asleep in the front seat. When I woke up at dawn, something was different. Not the air, not the van. Me. I felt wrong. Heavy, not tired, hollow. Like someone had scooped something out of me while I slept. I checked the cabinets, checked under the seats, checked every drawer and pocket. Everything was untouched until I opened the glove box. Inside, wrapped in a napkin from that diner in Pagosa Springs, was the flannel jacket from the red van. I hadn't taken it. I swear to you, I hadn't touched it, but there it was. Folded, still warm, like someone had just taken it off. I sat there for a long time, the jacket in my lap, the napkin trembling in my hand, my mouth dry as dust, the sun rising like it had no idea what I'd seen, what I'd felt, what had followed me out here. I didn't touch the jacket again. I didn't smell it or check the pockets or hold it up to the light. I just stared. Because some part of me knew with the bone-deep certainty that has nothing to do with logic, that it was never just a jacket. It was an anchor, a tether, something that belonged elsewhere, but was now somehow bound to me. It wasn't about the glove anymore, or the pine cones, or even the tapping. It was about what they meant. Something had noticed me, something old, something deliberate, and now it was trying to make me understand, but understand what? I wrapped the jacket back in the napkin, stuffed it deep in the back cabinet of Alice, the one I rarely used, the one with the warped door. I shoved a pan in front of it, closed it tight. Then I sat behind the wheel and drove without a plan. I drove like I was trying to outrun a memory, Like maybe if I moved fast enough, far enough, the thread would snap, and I could go back to being someone who didn't believe in the things that crawl sideways through the cracks in the world. I drove until the forest turned to plains, until the plains turned to desert, until the sky stretched so wide it looked like it might swallow me whole. I stopped only when the fuel light blinked on and I realized my hands were blistered from gripping the wheel too tight. I was somewhere outside of Farmington, New Mexico. Flatland. No trees, no shade, just red dirt and dry heat. I pulled into a gas station, the kind that sells beef jerky and dusty postcards that haven't been touched since the early 90s. I filled the tank, got some water, used the bathroom. When I came back outside, something had changed. Alice looked off. Not broken, not vandalized, but wrong, like someone had moved her half an inch to the left, like she'd been touched by something that didn't know how to pretend to be human. I walked around her, pretending to check the tires, pretending not to be afraid. But when I reached the back, I saw it. Pine needles. 3 of them, laid out on the bumper like they'd been placed with care. There are no pine trees in Farmington. I didn't touch them. I didn't speak. I just got in the van and drove until my knuckles bled from holding the wheel too tight, until my eyes burned from forgetting to blink, until the sun began to set again, and the desert turned to dusk, and dusk turned to that thin blue silence that comes right before true dark. That's when the radio came on, by itself, the old one, the one that hadn't worked in years. Static at first, then a voice, distant, hollow, like it was broadcasting from somewhere underwater. It didn't say a name. It didn't say words, just rhythm. 4 taps, pause. 4 taps, over and over, until I ripped the knob off the dash, trying to shut it down. Then silence again, but not peace. No, never peace. Because now the rhythm was in my head. Every blink, every breath, 4 beats, pause, 4 more. It followed me into my sleep, into my dreams, into that fragile space between waking and gone, and it never left. It's been weeks now, or maybe longer. Time doesn't move the way it used to. I'm not in San Juan anymore, at least I don't think I am. But in some ways, I never really left. The forest came with me, not in trees, not in shadows, in me, in Alice. In the silence that now sits just behind every sound I hear. The gloves still gone. The jacket, still in the back, still folded, still warm. Every few days it moves just a little. A new crease, a different angle. Once, I swear, it looked like someone had worn it. There was dust on the shoulders that wasn't there before. And the pine cones? I don't see them anymore, but I hear them. Not the sound they make falling or cracking underfoot. I hear them thinking. Like they're not objects anymore. Like they were never just decoration. Like they were watching, waiting. Markers left in a world where the living had wandered too far into the places they don't belong. I don't camp much now. Not in the woods, not anywhere quiet. I park at truck stops near cities where the lights stay on all night and the buzz of life, the buzz loud enough to drown out the rhythm. But it doesn't always work. Sometimes even in the noise I'll hear it. A tap, a pause, a second tap. And I know I'm not alone. I was chosen, not for punishment, not even for fear, for remembrance. Because the forest doesn't forget and it doesn't forgive, it just waits. I thought I could live like this, with caution, with rituals, with a list of rules I never said out loud but always followed. Don't park near trees, don't drive at night unless you're already moving, never open the cabinets in the dark, and whatever you do, never answer when you hear your own name whispered outside the van. I thought if I obeyed those quiet rules, I could stay ahead of whatever had marked me. I thought it would grow bored or forget me or move on to someone else. But I was wrong. It doesn't forget. It learns. It adapts. It waits until you're tired, until you think it's over, until you begin to believe again in coffee and sunsets and strangers who wave from their own vans like none of this ever happened. It waits for you to trust again. That was my final mistake. I'd been parked near a lake in Utah. Not forest, just sagebrush and sand, far from anything wooded. The sun had dipped behind the hills, and I'd finally let my breath settle. A couple in a neighboring camper was laughing over card games. There were lights, music, even a dog barking somewhere down the road. I let myself smile. I made tea. I sat on the back cushion, pulled out my journal, and for the first time in weeks, I wrote something hopeful, and then I looked up. There was someone standing at the edge of the light. Not moving, just standing. At first, I thought it was a ranger. The silhouette was tall, human-shaped, still, but then I saw the arms, too long, hanging down like they didn't know where the ground was. The joints bent wrong. The head tilted just slightly too far to the side, as if mimicking a gesture it had seen once and never quite got right. It didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt it, the air around me compressing like I was underwater, and then it raised one hand. A glove, that same cracked leather, dangling from fingers that weren't made for hands. I slammed the sliding door shut, locked every latch, covered every window. I could hear my heart thudding in my ears, in my throat, behind my eyes. Then came the sound, not taps. This was scratching, low, deliberate. The way a spoon drags across the bottom of an empty pot, it circled the van, slowly. Once, twice, then silence. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something waiting to be named. I didn't sleep. I didn't even blink for hours. By dawn, the thing was gone. But it had left something behind the windshield. A perfect, symmetrical spiral made of pine needles held together with sap. Delicate, ritualistic. As if it were a message left for me in a language that didn't need words. And in the center, a single black stone. I don't know what it means, but I keep it. It's in my pocket now, as I speak these words. Not because I want it, but because I think if I let it go, it'll come back inside me, and I'd rather carry it where I can see it. The funny thing is, no one really talks about what haunting means when it's not a house. When it's not tied to a death or a place where blood was spilled. People don't know what to do when the thing that follows you doesn't care about stories or closure. When it's not a spirit. Not a person, just a presence that waits, that watches, that marks. San Juan marked me, and whatever it is that lives in those woods, it didn't need me to die, it didn't need me to scream, it just needed me to remember, to carry it, to witness. I don't think it was ever about fear. Fear was just the entry fee. What it wanted, what it wants is belief, obedience, reverence. That's why it starts with pine cones, with tapping, with the little things that make you question your own grip on the world. It wants you to notice, to know it's there, to stop pretending otherwise. I've stopped pretending. I've stopped running, too. There's a part of me now that understands maybe this thing is older than language, older than gods, older than guilt. Maybe it's the forest itself, or something buried under it, something that once fed on silence and still does. Maybe it's a cycle. Maybe I wasn't the first, and I won't be the last, but now I know the signs. Now I can feel the shift when the air gets too thick, when the shadows bend too slow, when a pine cone lands in a place it shouldn't, when a van door creaks without wind, and when I see those signs, I move. Not to run, not to fight, but to yield. Because I'm not a hunter anymore. I'm a messenger, a warning, still breathing. I never went back to San Juan. Not physically anyway, but it's in me now. Like a shadow I carry under the ribs, like a scar no one sees, but I still itch in the dark. And sometimes, late at night when I'm parked somewhere quiet, I think about that first campsite, the lake that didn't move, the van that shouldn't have been there, the knocks that sounded like questions. 4 taps, pause, 4 more. I still don't know what it means, and I'm not sure I want to. Because meaning implies intent. And intent, that's the part that makes it real. I've seen people try to explain things like this. They say spirits, they say folklore, they say tricks of the mind. But what if it's none of that? What if it's just presence? What if we don't matter to it at all? I think that's what finally broke me. Not that I was haunted, not that I was chosen, but that I was seen, not as a person, not even as a soul. Just as a moving thing, a twitch in the fabric, a breath taken where none was invited. You can't fight something that doesn't hate you. You can't plead with something that doesn't care. You can only acknowledge it, and I do. Every time I drive. Every time I pass a trailhead and feel the forest lean just slightly toward the van. Every time the air gets too still and the bugs fall quiet and I catch the scent of old pine and wet earth when there's nothing but dry asphalt around me. That's when I know it's near again. Not watching. Remembering. Sometimes I pass other vans, folks like me out there chasing some kind of freedom. The kind of people who believe that the road can scrub you clean, that silence is peace, that the further you go, the more of yourself you'll find. I wave, I smile, but sometimes I want to warn them. I want to roll down the window and shout, not every forest forgets, not every silence forgives. But I don't, because that's not how it works. No one could have warned me, not really. I had to see it. I had to feel it. I had to let it enter me through the spaces I didn't know I'd left open. So instead, I drive. I keep moving. The old VW rattles along back roads and mountain passes, her frame groaning, her engine sighing like she knows she's carrying more than just me now. She's carrying memory. And that memory hums sometimes. At night, when everything else is still. Not loud, not angry, just rhythmic. Tap, 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 tap. It's not always on the roof. Sometimes it's in the walls. Sometimes it's behind my eyes. Sometimes it's not sound at all. Just a feeling, a rhythm in the blood. A pulse that doesn't match my heartbeat. Something older, slower, patient. I've stopped trying to fight it. I don't think I was meant to. That's the lesson, maybe. Not that you'll win, not that you'll escape, but that you'll learn to see what's really out there. And you'll understand that the most dangerous thing isn't what chases you in the woods, it's what follows you back, what waits for you in reflection, in silence, in the moments between the taps. I parked outside a mechanic's shop a few days ago, somewhere in northern Arizona, needed a new belt. The guy looked over Alice, popped the hood, and whistled. "She seen some miles, huh?" "Yeah," I said, watching his hands. "Where you been?" I smiled without showing my teeth. "Colorado, then south." "Ever get up to San Juan?" My stomach twisted. "Yeah," I said softly. "Once." He nodded like he understood something I hadn't said. Then he reached into his breast pocket and pulled something out. A pine cone. Small. Dry. Cracked down the center. He set it on the van's front bumper like it was a tip, turned back to the shop, and said over his shoulder, "Some places don't let go. Doesn't mean you stop moving." I didn't ask him how he knew. Didn't ask where he'd been. I just picked up the pine cone, held it in my palm, and let the silence fall between us like dust. And for a moment, just a breath. I felt something shift, not peace, but recognition. The kind of quiet that comes when two ghosts pass each other on the same road, nodding in the rear view. So if you ever find yourself out in San Juan, if you ever park near a lake that doesn't ripple beside a van that shouldn't be there, if you hear taps that follow a rhythm, or find pine cones arranged in ways that don't feel accidental, listen. Don't speak. Don't run. Just listen. Because it's not trying to scare you. It's trying to remind you that in some places the wild isn't empty. It's waiting. And some of us never come back the same. I don't remember exactly when I stopped feeling excited about the road. Maybe it was the moment the trees started leaning a little too far over the road, like they were listening. Or maybe it was when my GPS froze, right there on a hairpin bend, just a blue dot surrounded by green and no roads in sight. I had been driving my old Volkswagen Westphalia, my Lucy, through the Cascade Mountains, chasing solitude or peace or something like it. I thought I knew what I was doing. I'd mapped everything. I had paper backups. I had water, a full tank. A playlist loaded with soft folk music and the sound of rain, because that's what you do when you're running from something. Make it romantic. I'd left the highway an hour ago. The road I turned onto was called Miller Ridge Cutoff, barely two thin lines on the map, with a reputation for being scenic, according to a camper I met back at Mount Hood. He smiled when he said it, a weird smile, like he wanted to say something else but didn't. That silence stuck with me. I should have asked. The first hour was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes you want to pull over and just disappear. moss climbing up the bark of old cedars, fog curling low like something breathing across the road. You'd swear the light changed slower here. Everything was drenched in green. Then the pavement stopped, and I should have turned around, but I didn't. The gravel was rough, but Lucy handled it. She always did. I'd driven her down worse in Arizona, in New Mexico, in backwoods Tennessee with barely a road sign in sight. This road just felt damp, like it hadn't dried out since last winter. Puddles in every dip. I slowed down, rolled the windows halfway, listened to the forest hum. You can tell a lot from how a forest sounds. This one sounded too quiet. It wasn't until I passed the second set of tire tracks, fresh ones, deep ones, veering off into a trail that looked like it shouldn't have been there, that something inside me pulled tight. I didn't stop, but I noted it, the kind of noting that sits at the back of your throat. About 15 minutes later, I lost signal completely, and I mean completely. My phone didn't just show no service, it showed nothing, just black. When I tapped the screen, the battery logo flickered, and then nothing, dead, no warning, no crash, just gone. That's when I started hearing the knocking. It was faint at first, just a little tap like a pine cone falling. But it wasn't random. It came in threes, always three. Then silence, then three again. I slowed down, turned the radio off. 3 more knocks, this time louder. Then silence. I looked up and saw something strange in the rearview mirror. Just the faintest shimmer, like heat waves. But it was cold, 40 degrees at best. I tapped the brakes. Lucy coughed like she didn't like the sudden stop. I stepped out. The gravel crunched under my boots, and the forest sucked in the sound like it hated noise. I turned in a slow circle. Nothing, just trees, damp earth, a bit of fog curling around the base of an old stump. And then I smelled it. It wasn't rot, not quite. More like something that had once been clean, now soaked through and forgotten, like wet cloth and iron, something coppery, metallic. I felt my stomach twist. I got back into Lucy and locked the doors. Silly, maybe, but it felt necessary. And that's when I noticed something in the passenger seat. It was small, brown, damp, like a bundle of moss wrapped around something heavy. I hadn't put it there. I swear on everything, I hadn't put it there. I didn't touch it. I just stared, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Then I heard the knocking again. This time it wasn't distant. It came from underneath the van. 3 taps, then silence. 3 taps. I froze. That kind of fear, primal, paralyzing, it's not dramatic. It's slow. Your brain tries to explain it, rationalize it. Maybe a branch rolled under. Maybe the engine's cooling off. Maybe then Lucy's radio turned on. Static, loud. I fumbled to shut it off. The volume knob fought back like it was jammed. I smacked it. The sound dropped, then rose again, screeching. Then, clear as day, a voice. Not a song, not a station, just a voice. You shouldn't have stopped. I hit the kill switch on the van, yanked the keys out. Silence. My breathing was the only sound in the cabin. Heavy, shaky. The moss bundle was gone. Gone. I didn't look for it. I didn't want to know. I turned the key again, desperate to get moving. Lucy started, but rough, like she didn't want to. We rolled forward, slow. Every shadow outside the window felt too still, every tree too close. That road narrowed, grew steeper, muddy, and then I came to a split in the road. No signs, no GPS, no sun overhead, just gray sky leaking fog like smoke. Left or right, and there was that smell again. Stronger now, mixed with something else. Burned wood, and something beneath it. Hair, like singed fur. I don't know what made me turn left. I still think about it sometimes, how my hand moved the wheel before I could reason it out, like I was being pulled or pushed. The road got worse. Moss grew thick in the center, the kind of thick that says no tires have passed here in a long time. I looked down and realized the tire tracks I was following, they weren't tire tracks anymore. They were footprints, deep, bare, human. And they went on, and they never veered. Not once. I slowed the van to a crawl. The wheels grumbled over soft moss, which was growing thicker now, almost plush like velvet. But it wasn't just moss anymore. It was slick, slippery, and red in patches. At first, I told myself it was clay or iron-rich soil bleeding through, but deep down, I knew better. You can smell blood when you've been around long enough in the wild. This was it. Sharp, tangy, faint, but there. The footprints led straight ahead, down into a gully that looked too narrow for even a jeep, and yet the path bent around the trees like something had carved its way through. Something tall, something deliberate. I stopped the van and killed the engine. This time, I didn't hear knocking. I heard breathing. Not mine. Not close, but not far. It came from the woods just past the tree line. Long, slow exhalations, like something with lungs, big ones, breathing through its mouth. I sat still for nearly a minute, heart pounding so loud it filled the van. Then I made the mistake of opening the window a crack. It was just instinct. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought I'd hear better. Maybe I thought I could convince myself it was wind. It wasn't. The moment the air touched my face, I gagged. Something rancid blew in. Something old, like flesh left too long in cold mud. I slammed the window shut and put my hand on the gear shift. But I didn't move, because just ahead, maybe 10 feet in front of Lucy, I saw something crouched by the tree line. Not walking, not standing. Crouched, like a person, but the wrong shape. The limbs were too long, the knees were wrong, and the head, it tilted in a way no head should tilt. It didn't move. It just stared. There was no face. I swear to God, no eyes, no mouth. Just skin, stretched and gray like something that forgot how to be human. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked. My vision tunneled. Then the knocking came again. This time from inside the van. Knock, 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 knock. 3 times. I turned, slow, shaking. Nothing. No one in the back, no one at the side door. But the rear curtain, the one I always kept tied, was untied, hanging loose. Something had been back there. I didn't think. I just drove. Fast. Too fast. The road tore at Lucy's undercarriage. Branches scraped the sides. Mud sprayed up like oil. But the path narrowed and the trees grew denser, like they were closing in. Every turn felt sharper than it should have been. Then, around a bend, I saw it. A tunnel. Not man-made. Not concrete. This was something older. A gap between 2 ancient trees, roots arching above like ribs. Fog poured through it like smoke from a burning house. I didn't want to go in. Every part of me screamed not to. But the road left me no choice. So I entered. And the moment I did, the light changed. It went dim like dusk, even though it was only late afternoon. The fog turned silver. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. My breath fogged the windshield. Then static. The radio. Again, I hadn't touched it. It had been off, but now it was blaring static, hissing like fire. And through it, voices, multiple, whispering, layered. They didn't say anything clear, just fragments, like memories chopped into syllables. Back, don't always watching again. Then laughter, thin, childlike. Then silence. The tunnel stretched longer than it should have, at least a mile. I kept driving. My headlights barely touched the walls. Something moved in the fog. I refused to look. I kept my eyes forward and hands locked on the wheel, and then, finally, I broke through, out into light. But it wasn't the same road. It wasn't the same forest. I pulled Lucy to a stop and cut the engine. Everything was wrong. The trees here were black, not burned, but black like soot-stained bones. The sky above was gray, but not cloudy. Just wrong, washed out like a faded photo. And the forest was quiet, not silent. Quiet, like a held breath, like something was listening. I stepped out because I had to see if it was real. My boots hit the ground, and it didn't even crunch. It just absorbed me. The moss here wasn't green, it was blue, almost glowing. I took one step forward, then another. Then I saw the sign, an old wooden one, half rotted and leaning sideways, carved into it, almost invisible under the moss. You made a wrong turn. No punctuation, no explanation, just that. And beneath it, scratched so faintly I had to run my fingers across it to feel the grooves. We follow those who listen. I turned back to Lucy, and that's when I saw them. Shapes. Dozens. Standing just beyond the tree line, all the same shape, all too long, too wrong, watching. I ran. I didn't think. I dove into Lucy, started her up, threw it into reverse, spun the wheel so hard I nearly flipped her. Branches slapped the windshield. One cracked it. The side mirror tore off. Mud flew. I didn't stop. Not until I saw that tunnel again. I hit it doing 30. The moment I crossed back through, I could breathe again. The light changed. The forest smelled like trees, not meat. The road reappeared behind me. Gravel, real. I didn't look back. I just drove, faster than I should have, for miles, until the forest opened up and I saw pavement again. And then the faintest glimmer of cell signal on my phone. I pulled over and cried. I cried for 20 minutes. I didn't tell anyone right away. What would I have said? That I drove into a place that shouldn't exist? That the road changed? That the forest moved? That I saw things with no faces and limbs that bent the wrong way? No, I didn't say anything. I drove for hours that day. Didn't even stop to eat. My hands stayed locked on the wheel until the sky turned pink and the trees thinned out into open land. I found a tiny fuel station just off the 101, the kind that sells motor oil, jerky, and maybe one brand of soda. The guy at the counter didn't look up when I walked in. "Northbound?" he asked without turning. I paused. "Came from the east," I said. He turned then, looked me up and down. His eyes landed on the mud caked up to my knees, the smear on my jacket that looked too dark to be dirt. "You go through the forest?" I didn't answer. He didn't push. Instead, he rang up my gas, handed me a paper map, unfolded, and said, "Use this. Don't follow GPS out here. It lies." I stared at the map. The road I had taken, the one with the footprints, the tunnel, the sign, wasn't on it. The area it should have been was just marked in a hazy patch of forest labeled Wilderness Reserve, Access Restricted. No trails, no ranger stations, no nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I parked Lucy at a beachside campground and locked every door. I kept the curtains closed, but I swear I could feel the fog creeping toward me. Even with the ocean a few feet away, the scent of damp rot still clung to my clothes. And that night I dreamed. It wasn't a normal dream. It was the road, the one with blue moss and black trees. I was walking it barefoot. The ground pulsed under me. The fog whispered names I couldn't understand, my name, then others. Names I've never heard but felt like I should know. And always, always, just behind me, footsteps. Not fast, not chasing. Just keeping pace, following. I woke up soaked in sweat, my throat hoarse like I'd been screaming. But the worst part, when I opened the curtain to let in the morning sun, I saw 3 knocks on the outside of the van door. Not dents, not scratches. Knocks. Perfectly spaced. Chest height. Pressed into the dew like someone had laid cold hands there in the night. I left before breakfast, before the sun fully rose. I didn't look back. You think the road lets you go once you escape it, that if you make it back to asphalt, to signal bars and gas stations and regular people talking about sports and the weather, that it's over. It's not. Not when you've heard the voices, not when something knows your name. It followed me. Not literally. Not in a way you could prove, but I felt it. At night, I'd wake up to find the van colder than it should be, even in summer. Windows fogged from the outside, even with the vents closed. Sometimes the smell returned, just faintly when the air got still. And once, outside a diner in Northern California, I caught a glimpse of something reflected in the side mirror. Just for a second. A shape, too tall, crouched low beside the van, gone when I turned. I stopped camping for a while after that. Stayed in motels, on grid, among people. But it never felt right. I hadn't gone into those woods by accident. Something in me had pulled me there. Something broken, something curious, something reckless. I think it finds people like that. I think it waits for them. And when they finally show up, tired of the world and its rules and its crowds, it opens a door. And the worst part, it makes it feel like your idea, like you chose it. But eventually I couldn't help myself. You don't drive a Volkswagen camper just to stay parked. You don't love the road just to forget it. So I went back out, not to the same place, never again to that place, but to others. Wider roads, popular parks, campsites with neighbors and dogs and flickering lanterns. It helped for a while, until I met someone. At a state park just outside Crater Lake, she was in a faded yellow Westie, Oregon plates, early 40s maybe, alone. We got to talking about routes. about the best spots for free camping, the worst roads, the ones Google Maps didn't know. I mentioned the Cascades. Her face changed. She didn't ask where. She just said, "Did you hear it knock?" I froze. She didn't wait for me to answer. "Don't go looking again," she said. "Even thinking about it brings it back." Then she climbed into her van and drove away. No goodbye. Just gone. And in that moment, I knew something I hadn't wanted to admit. It wasn't just me. There were others. Other drivers, other campers, others who'd taken a turn they shouldn't have. Heard the knocking, smelled the rot, seen the impossible. We don't talk about it online. Not really. We just avoid certain threads, change the subject when someone asks about off-grid camping in the PNW. We warn quietly, with looks, with loaded silences. We keep our engines tuned, we keep our tanks full, we pay attention to which direction the fog rolls in, and when we hear knocking, we drive. We always drive. You learn to live with it. That's the truth. No one tells you about fear when it stops being an event and starts becoming a presence, something you carry like a second spine. You learn to pretend, to laugh at the stories around the fire, to smile when someone says, "Bet you've seen some weird things out there, huh?" And all the while, there's a part of you standing at the edge of a fog-choked trail, watching the trees for movement, listening for that slow rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. I kept camping because you don't walk away from the road once it changes you. You just learn to walk differently. You make deals with yourself. Little rules to feel safe. No camping without signal. No roads that aren't on the map. No turning left when you feel uncertain. No tunnels made of trees. But it doesn't matter how many rules you make if the thing you're running from doesn't follow them. One night, almost a year later, I was camped in Oregon near the Rogue River. A wide-open sight, people nearby, firelight flickering from other campers' rings, laughter drifting in from 3 tents over, safe, comfortable. I'd let my guard down, and that's when it came back. It started with the air. The temperature dropped, not gradually, but sudden, like someone opened a walk-in freezer right behind me. The hairs on my arms stood up. Then the fire dimmed. Not all at once, just enough to make me lean forward and check the wood. Nothing was wrong. The flames were still licking high, but they were colorless, pale orange, sickly, and the sound faded. I looked up and the laughter was gone. The other camps silent, still, not even a cough, not even a shuffle in the leaves. Just stillness. I stepped away from the fire toward Lucy, and that's when I saw them. Footprints, fresh, leading from the edge of the woods to the side of the van. Deep, bare, and wrong. Toes longer than they should be, no heel arch, just pads. Animal? No. Human-shaped but off, like someone trying to mimic human feet and not getting it quite right. I opened the van door. Inside was warm, dry, but the air smelled like wet leaves and copper. And on the table, my journal, open to a page I didn't remember writing, but it was in my handwriting, and the message was short. It's not the road that's haunted. It's you. I didn't sleep that night, didn't try. I packed up before dawn and left without breakfast. I didn't say goodbye to the other campers. I didn't even check if they were still there. Part of me didn't want to know. Because what if they weren't? What if the stillness had never lifted? What if I was already somewhere I couldn't come back from? There's something about the Pacific Northwest people don't understand until they've spent long enough in it alone. It's not just the trees. It's not the rain or the fog or the silence. It's how alive everything feels. How aware. Like the forest isn't just a place, it's a presence, a witness, a memory. And some of those memories go so deep, they start to rewrite yours. I started forgetting things. Small things at first, where I parked Lucy, what road I'd taken to get to a trailhead, whether I'd locked the door at night. Then, bigger things. A whole day lost in Idaho. I have pictures of the sunrise and nothing else. No memory of lunch, no memory of dinner, no journal entry, just a stretch of road between 2 pine forests and a gap in my mind, like static. Another time, I woke up in Utah with dried mud on my hands and the back door of the van wide open. No footprints, no signs of wildlife, just that same smell, that same cold, and the words carved into the condensation on the inside of the window. You called us. I don't know how much of this is real anymore. I mean that truly. I know what I experienced. But I also know how memory can bend under pressure, how fear can stretch reality like heat on a windshield, how stories passed in whispers can shape the things we see when the sun dips behind the hills. But I also know this. I'm not alone. I've met others, quiet ones, people who camp in the shadows of volcanoes, who chase thunderstorms in Wyoming, who sleep under the stars on the loneliest desert roads. Some of them carry the same silence in their eyes, the same haunted calm. They don't say much, but when we lock eyes, there's this flicker, a kind of recognition, like soldiers who fought different battles in the same war. Some of them have scars, not always physical, but real. One man in northern Montana kept a circle of salt around his van every night. Wouldn't talk about why, just said it keeps the knockers out. He laughed when he said it, but not like it was funny, more like he didn't know how else to say it. I've learned to live with it, the road, the silence, the not knowing. It doesn't scare me the way it used to. Now, it's more like a shadow, a second pulse. I keep moving because if I stay still too long, the forest remembers me. It starts to pull. The air gets heavy. The moss leans closer. My name echoes in places where no voice should travel. I still hear the knocking. Not often. Just once in a while. Usually when I think I'm alone. 3 taps. Always 3. Always spaced the same, like a warning or maybe an invitation. I used to think survival was about running away, putting miles between yourself and whatever chased you, outpacing the fear, burying it beneath engine noise and playlists and distraction. But the thing about fear, the kind that sinks into your bones, the kind that smells like moss and iron and breathes through your vents at night, it doesn't stay behind. It rides with you. Sometimes I wonder if Lucy's picked it up too. She's changed. Not just in the little ways, rattling more than she used to, the hum in the dashboard lights, the fridge clicking at night even when unplugged, but in how she moves. Sometimes she hesitates before a turn, slows down before I do, like she knows what's waiting around the bend, like she's learned to listen. It sounds crazy, I know, but when you've lived long enough on the edge of something you can't name, everything becomes a signal. Every sound, every shadow, every breath of wind that smells just a little too sweet or sour or burnt. You notice, you adapt, you survive. It's been 2 years since that road in the Cascades. I haven't gone back. But sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I swear I can feel it, just outside the van, waiting, like a dream that followed me home. Other times when I'm driving through rain and the fog curls around my mirrors, I see that silhouette again. Not clear, not real, but just close enough to remember how my heart sounded when I thought it was the last thing I'd ever hear. And here's the strangest part. There's a piece of me that misses it. That ache, that moment of sharp soul-deep dread when the forest swallowed everything, when the road stopped being a road and became a memory, it reminded me I was alive, more than alive, awake. The world gets quiet in those places, real quiet, not the kind of quiet you find on a beach or in the middle of a desert. This quiet presses, it watches, it pulls the breath from your chest and holds it until you remember that you are very, very small. And somehow in that smallness, you find something holy, a clarity, a voice. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's the forest's, maybe it doesn't matter. I've learned to stop trying to explain it. The people who've heard the knocking, they don't need the details. The ones who haven't won't believe anyway. They'll smile, nod politely, and change the subject. But those who know, they carry it with them, in the way they check the mirrors a little more often, in the way they pause before opening the door after a strange sound at night, in how they don't ask where you've been, but how far in you went. They're not running. They're listening. And that's what I do now, too. I don't camp alone the way I used to. I don't hunt silence like it's some kind of prize. I listen to the wind in the trees, to the water under the soil, to the breath of the forest when it thinks I'm asleep. I drive slower. I park with the nose facing the exit. I carry salt, a compass, and a single item I never talk about. I never camp 3 nights in the same place. I never ignore the smell of smoke in the rain, and when I hear the knocking, I answer it with motion, not fear, not flight, just movement. Because that's how you survive the road out here. You move, not away, but forward. Eyes open, heart steady, breath held until the air feels right again. And if you ever find yourself on a road that isn't on the map, one that curves a little too naturally, that's too quiet even for birds, if you see footprints that don't match the ones you made, if the fog doesn't drift but waits, turn around. Don't think, don't rationalize, don't explore, turn around. Because once you've heard it, that soft, deliberate rhythm behind your left ear, nah. It's already too late to pretend it didn't find you. But you're not alone. We're out here. All of us who've returned. We're still driving, still listening, still surviving. And maybe that's what the road was always trying to teach us. That the scariest paths don't end in screams, they end in understanding. That some places aren't meant to be found. And some fears, they're not here to break us. They're here to remind us. We were never lost, only warned. And the warning came not in words, not in signs, but in rhythm. 3 steady knocks, a question, a gate, and the forest waits for your answer, always. I should have trusted the silence. It wasn't the kind of quiet you find in peaceful places. The stillness of dawn, the hush of snowfall, the calm just before a river wakes. No, this silence had weight to it. It pressed against the windshield of my van like a living thing, thick and heavy and full of breath it refused to let out. But I was too proud, too tired, and too in love with the idea of escaping it all to admit what I already knew. I shouldn't have been alone out there. The Badlands had been on my list for years. Something about their desolation drew me in. Those jagged spires rising like broken teeth from the earth, the endless moonscape of cracked sediment, fossils buried just beneath your boots. People say the Badlands don't want you there, and maybe they're right. But I didn't believe in that kind of talk. I believed in preparation, in instinct, and in Lucy. My '79 Volkswagen Westphalia camper van that had carried me safely through the Rockies, across the Mojave, and down lonely roads in New Mexico without ever complaining once. It was the 3rd week of October when I pulled into the primitive camping area near Sage Creek. No hookups, no amenities, no other campers that I could see. Just a rusted, bear-proof trash can, a wooden post with the number 7 on it, and the wind, always the wind, moving like it had secrets to carry. I parked Lucy facing west, knowing the sun would hit her windshield first thing in the morning. The plan was simple. 2 nights, just me and the landscape. I wanted to hike, photograph bison, maybe write a little. I hadn't seen another vehicle for over 45 minutes, and I liked it that way. Solitude was why I came, but something about the place felt wrong. And it wasn't the kind of wrong you can explain. It started small. The feeling that I was being watched, though there was no one around for miles. The way the dry grass stopped swaying a few feet out from the van, as if the air itself thinned beyond some invisible line. Even Lucy seemed different, her interior darker than usual, colder. I chalked it up to exhaustion. I'd driven from Rapid City that morning and hadn't eaten much. My shoulders ached. My mind was cluttered. I heated some lentils on the small propane stove and sat on the bed with a book I couldn't concentrate on. Outside, the sky turned the color of a fading bruise, purples and reds sinking into the jagged horizon. I opened a window slightly to let in the breeze, but the air that came in wasn't fresh. It smelled metallic, like old coins and wet stone. I remember shivering. I told myself it was just the desert climate, the temperature drop at night. I'd camped in worse, but that silence kept creeping back in. There were no crickets, no owls, no coyotes calling in the distance, just wind, and beneath it, something else, something lower, a frequency you didn't hear so much as feel. I lay down early, more out of unease than tiredness. The wind picked up around 11 p.m., tugging at Lucy's pop-top like it wanted in. I was wrapped in my sleeping bag, like staring up at the ceiling when I heard it. 3 knocks. Sharp, deliberate, right against the sliding door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My mind scrambled for logic. A branch? A falling pine cone? But there were no trees. Nothing close enough to scrape or knock. I turned onto my side slowly, heart thudding, and reached for the flashlight I always kept near the bed. Another knock, louder this time. Still 3. I turned on the light and aimed it at the door. Nothing. No shadows. No movement. I eased up and slid back the curtain, just pitch black and my own breath fogging up the window. And then footsteps, soft, crunching the gravel just outside. Not animal footsteps, not the 4-beat rhythm of a deer or the weight of a bison. These were human. They circled the van once, then again, slow, like they were thinking, like they knew I was awake, frozen inside, listening to every footfall. I grabbed my knife. It wasn't much, but it felt better than being empty-handed. I didn't dare open the door, didn't dare turn off the light. I waited, listening. Eventually, the footsteps stopped, and I sat there for what must have been hours, staring at the door, unable to sleep. Morning came like a drug. The sunlight didn't feel warm, didn't feel right, but at least it gave me something to anchor to. I got out of the van slowly, scanning the dirt for prints. Nothing clear, but then again, the wind could have wiped them. My gut told me to leave. Every cell in my body was screaming, but I didn't. I was raised not to let fear dictate my choices. I told myself it was probably just some drifter passing through, maybe even some idiot teenager playing a prank. By mid-morning, I was halfway down a trail leading toward Deer Haven, trying to shake off the night. The landscape was eerie in the daylight. Those pale clay hills folding over themselves like melted wax, bones jutting out of the soil like the earth had been flayed open. The wind carried voices, but they weren't real, just echoes of my own boots on stone, my own breath bouncing off the empty ridges. At one point, I spotted a shape on a distant hill. I raised my camera. It wasn't a bison. It wasn't any animal I recognized. Tall, too tall, and thin, like a figure in a coat with no legs beneath it. I blinked. It was gone. I turned back. The trail felt longer on the return. The sun was dipping again, low and red. I made it to the van just as twilight wrapped the rocks in that pale, ghostly hue. I stood outside for a long time, just listening, daring the silence to break first. Nothing did. That night, I didn't cook, didn't read, just sat with Lucy locked up tight and the curtains drawn, knife in hand, flashlight under my knee. I stayed like that for hours, listening. And then, around 1 a.m., the knocks came back. 3 again. But this time, they weren't on the door. They came from the roof. At first, I thought maybe the pop top had come loose in the wind. It had done that once in Oregon. A gust had caught it and rattled it loud enough to wake the dead. But this was different. 3 knocks, slow, rhythmic, right above me. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the ceiling of the pop top like I could will it into silence. My hand clenched the handle of the knife so tightly my knuckles popped. There was no mistaking the intent behind the sound. It wasn't random. It wasn't nature. It was someone or something telling me they were still out there, still watching, still waiting. I flicked off the flashlight. My instinct told me that light only made me easier to find. I crawled slowly off the bed and sat hunched over in the van's cabin, knees against my chest. I'd never felt more exposed. No cell signal, no neighbors, no ranger station, just the cold, wide open and the low pulse of fear reverberating in my ears. And then it shifted, the weight. I felt it. Something moved on the roof, not heavy like a person, not light like a bird, somewhere in between, too deliberate to be an animal, too cautious to be weather. I sat frozen for what felt like a lifetime, listening to the faint creaks above me. Lucy didn't usually give herself away like this, but whatever it was, it made her betray me. Her joints popped as it crawled forward. Then silence again. I waited an hour. 2, maybe 3. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I remember is the light, soft, dull, bleeding in through the cracked edge of the curtain. Morning. I stepped out the side door and looked up at the roof. Nothing. No claw marks. No boot prints. Just dust and maybe a single long streak like something had dragged a stick across it. I checked around the van, no footprints, no signs, but the silence was worse now. Not peaceful, hollow, like something had been taken away in the night. I made coffee with trembling hands, burned my tongue on the first sip, and didn't care. Every survival instinct I had was screaming. But what do you do when nothing has happened? What do you tell yourself when all you've got are sounds and feelings and cold metal under your spine? I've spent a lot of time alone. I've hiked glaciers solo, spent nights in national forests where no one knew my name. But this was different. This wasn't wild animals or isolation. This wasn't fear of getting lost. This was intrusion, something unnatural trying to make itself feel natural. I packed up camp slowly, told myself I was just going to drive to the next ridge, maybe scout out a new spot, but in my gut, I knew I wasn't coming back. The dirt road was soft from overnight moisture, but Lucy pushed through like she always did. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see someone, something, walking behind me, just barely in frame. But there was nothing, just that same open land, indifferent and immense. I made it down the ridge and onto the main park road, and for a moment, the tension in my chest eased. Just enough to breathe, just enough to think maybe, I'd let my imagination get the best of me. Until I saw the other van. It was parked on the shoulder near one of the overlooks, an older Westphalia, just like mine. Same year, same color, same make. My heart dropped like a stone in my gut, because I knew that van. I didn't know how, but I did. There were scratches across the driver's side window, long, curling, not like tree branches, more like claws, and scrawled in dust across the back window, barely visible in the sunlight. Don't stay alone. I stopped, got out, walked up to it like I was walking toward a corpse. I peered inside, empty. The bed was unmade, a cup sat in the sink, keys in the ignition, but no one, no thing. Just a van parked in the middle of nowhere, looking like it had been abandoned in a rush. The door was unlocked. I didn't go in. I couldn't. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. I started Lucy up and pulled back onto the road without thinking. I didn't look back, not once. I drove until I hit the interstate. Didn't stop for gas, didn't stop for food. I drove like something was chasing me, even though the rearview mirror was empty. It was days before I felt safe again, weeks before I stopped waking up in the middle of the night listening for knocks, and months before I told anyone what happened. It's been 2 years now. I've gone back to camping, but not alone. Never again alone. I still have Lucy. She's parked in my driveway under the pines. I take her out when I can, but only to places with people, lights, voices, places with noise. I've tried to forget the Badlands, tried to rationalize, but that silence stays with me. It's like a scar on the inside of my ears. I can still hear it when the wind dies down and the world goes still. And every now and then, when I'm driving long stretches and the sun's just right in the mirror, I see another van, just like mine, following, disappearing when I blink. And I remember those 3 knocks, not asking to be let in, just reminding me they still know where I am. I used to think fear was something you could outgrow, that with enough experience, enough preparation, enough nights under the stars, you could beat it back, learn its shape, understand its rhythms. I thought fear was a wild animal you could tame if you just kept looking it in the eye. But that night in the Badlands taught me something different. Some fear isn't yours. Some fear doesn't come from you at all. It finds you, hooks into the cracks you don't know are there, waits for silence, and then it speaks. The months that followed were complicated. I returned home, if you could call it that. A tiny 1-bedroom cabin up near the north shore of Minnesota, surrounded by birch trees and wind that never quite sounded like just wind. I tried to get back to normal. Did the small things, laundry, repairs on Lucy, cutting firewood, canceling old travel plans. But the nights were hard. I'd hear knocking, always 3. Sometimes on the door, sometimes on the wall behind my bed. Once on the window by the sink while I was brushing my teeth. Every time I ran outside with a flashlight, there'd be nothing. Just woods, just wind. Friends told me I needed to get out more, join a hiking club, start dating again. They meant well. but I couldn't bring myself to talk about what really haunted me. Not the footsteps, not the van on the ridge, not even the scrawled warning on that dusty rear window. What haunted me was how familiar it all felt, like I'd been followed by something I already knew, something old, something patient. By early spring, I'd made up my mind to go back. Not to the Badlands, not exactly, but to the idea of it. I couldn't live in fear, not forever. I wasn't about to spend the rest of my life jumping at shadows and pretending I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But I also wasn't stupid. This time, I brought a friend. Sam and I met at a van meetup in Flagstaff a couple years earlier. He was ex-military, no-nonsense, sharp-eyed, the kind of guy who could gut a trout, fix a carburetor, and quote Kerouac in the same breath. I told him what happened, most of it, and he didn't laugh. Didn't joke. Just looked at me for a long moment and said, "I believe you. Let's see where it goes." So we planned a trip. Not to the same site, but close. Same terrain, same kind of isolation. 2 vans, 2 people, radios for communication. It felt safer, smarter. But when we arrived, the land remembered me. I could feel it. I don't know how to explain that without sounding unhinged, but it was like stepping back into a room where something terrible had happened and realizing nothing had been moved. The rocks looked the same. The air tasted the same. The wind, though warm and sweet, carried that same low, impossible thrum just beneath the surface. Sam didn't seem to notice at first. He set up camp, got the fire going, even laughed at a couple of my stories. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that maybe this was how I beat it, by not being alone, by taking control. But as the sun dropped behind those jagged spires again, the light began to stretch strange, longer than it should have. Almost pulled, and the air got colder than it had any right to be. That's when Sam saw it. We were sitting by the fire, a pot of chili bubbling on the flames, when he stopped mid-sentence, just froze, staring out toward the ridge. "Did you see that?" he asked. "What?" Something moved. "Where?" He pointed. Top of the ridge, looked like a man or something tall, but it didn't walk right. We both stood. I grabbed the binoculars. Scanned the crest. Nothing. But I felt it, that same pressure, like the silence had gotten teeth again. We didn't talk much the rest of that night. Ate quietly, slept with the vans parked close, or radios crackling now and then with static that didn't belong to either of us. Around 2 a.m., Sam's voice came through. "You awake?" "Yeah." "You hear that?" "No." "What?" He paused. 3 knocks. I shot upright. My van was quiet. I stepped into the cold night barefoot, radio in one hand, flashlight in the other, walked the short distance to Sam's van. He stood outside, staring at his side panel. There were 3 fresh marks across it, long, curved, parallel, not scratches. Impressions, as if the metal had been pushed inward, slowly, with something not quite solid, not quite liquid. I touched the marks and drew my hand back. Freezing cold. We left before sunrise. Didn't talk much on the drive out. Didn't need to. By the time we reached a gas station 3 towns over, Sam finally spoke. "You weren't imagining it." "No," I said. He looked at me, eyes darker than I'd ever seen. "It doesn't want us in the open," I nodded. "It wants us alone." Since then, I've changed how I camp. I don't go without people I trust. I avoid places where the wind sounds too much like breath. I sleep lightly, keep Lucy cleaned, repaired, stocked. I haven't returned to the Badlands, and I don't plan to. But sometimes when I park at night in some distant place with no signal and no neighbors, I'll wake up cold. The van quiet. The world still. And there it is again. Knock, knock, knock. Like it's checking. Like it's waiting for the moment I forget. There's something you learn after months of trying to forget a thing that won't let you. It teaches you in fragments, reflections in rearview mirrors, dreams that end in the same cold sweat, voices in the wind that aren't voices at all. It teaches you that some places aren't haunted because of what happened there. Some places are haunted because of what they are. Open wounds in the earth where reality thins just enough to let something through. The Badlands weren't just the beginning. They were the opening note. Because the thing that knocked, it didn't stay behind. It traveled. It changed shape. It learned me. I didn't realize that fully until I stopped in a Walmart parking lot in Missouri one night, just to sleep off a long drive. There were people around, security lights, the distant hum of traffic. I remember thinking, finally, I could rest. At 3:22 a.m., I heard it again. Not the knocks this time, not at first. It was humming, a low, warbling sound like someone running their finger around the rim of a glass bottle. It came from somewhere inside the van, but I couldn't place it. I turned on the light, checked every corner, nothing. But the sound didn't stop. It got closer. And then 3 knocks. This time they came from inside the cabinet under the sink. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at it. I'd locked that cabinet earlier that day with a bungee cord. But now the cord lay slack on the floor. I opened it, empty. But the humming remained for just a moment longer. Then it stopped. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't sleep the next either. I drove with the radio off, stopped checking my phone. I could feel it crawling inside me, the suspicion, the dread. I started seeing signs in every shadow, started noticing how often I passed the same model car twice, how my Maps app sometimes rerouted me back toward open plains, even when I set a different course. I began to think Lucy wasn't mine anymore, that something else had taken interest in her, or in me. I parked at a friend's place outside Boulder for a week, hoping proximity to people would kill whatever had followed me. And it helped, until the 4th night when my friend Meg knocked on my van window, pale-faced and shaking. "There's something in your roof," she whispered. "I swear I saw it move." She was gone the next morning. No note, just gone, her phone disconnected, her house locked, her cat left behind. No one's seen her since. And all I could think was, I'd brought it with me. That night, I sat in Lucy until dawn, doors open, lights on, staring at the horizon, begging for answers that didn't come. And somewhere deep inside, I began to realize it was never about the Badlands. It wasn't about where I was. It was about what I was doing, about being alone, listening, inviting. Because I think that's how it starts. You go into the wilderness looking for healing, for solitude, for silence, and something answers back. But it doesn't speak in words. It speaks in absence of noise, of people, of light. It clears the stage so you have no one left to disbelieve what's happening. And then it knocks, not to scare you, not at first, but to ask, to see. What kind of person are you when you're truly alone? Will you invite it in? Will you run? Will you pretend you didn't hear? And I think that's the most terrifying part. The slow realization that maybe, just maybe, you already did. I don't camp the same way anymore. Lucy's still mine, but I keep her under lock and key these days. Salt under the floor mats, an iron nail under the driver's seat. I've learned from old sources, folklore, fringe survivalist forums, even a Navajo elder I met by accident in a coffee shop in Arizona. He looked me up and down once, didn't blink, and said, "You brought something back with you. Didn't bury it right." He gave me sage, told me to burn it while facing east, said whatever follows me doesn't like clean fire or morning light. I did what he said. The dreams lessened. The knocks became fewer. But they didn't stop. And the worst part, I've met others, people like me. I went to a camper meetup in Utah months after Meg vanished, kept my story to myself, just listened. And one night over a campfire with a man named Ellis, broad shoulders, marine tattoo, told us a story. He'd camped solo in the Dakotas years ago. He heard knocks. He saw shapes. He smelled something like rust and copper and broken teeth. He hasn't slept without earplugs since. Another woman, Jules, said her dog refused to go near her van after she spent a night on Bureau of Land Management land near the Badlands. Refused. Growled at it like it had become something else. These stories, they're spreading. Always similar, always starting with silence, and always ending with distance, the kind of distance that opens a door inside you. I've started keeping journals now, not for proof, just to keep my mind straight, because the farther I get from that first trip, the harder it becomes to separate what happened from what I think happened. Memory warps when fear gets involved. Time distorts. But one thing I remember perfectly, like a photograph etched into the back of my mind, is that feeling, that first knock. how certain it was, how it didn't try to frighten me. Not really. It was polite, measured, patient, like it had all the time in the world, like it knew I'd answer eventually. And maybe that's the final truth I've come to accept. You don't run from the Badlands. You carry them inside you. You carry them in the hollow moments, the in-betweens. When the engine idles a little too long at a stoplight in a forgotten town. When you're parked beside a quiet lake and the water reflects nothing. When the birds go still all at once for no reason, and even the insects seem to pause, like something older has stepped into the room. You carry them when you lie awake in your van, hours from anyone, and you hear it again. Knock, knock, knock. 3, always 3. Like a question, like an invitation. And I don't know what's worse, that it follows me or that sometimes I miss it. There were nights after that first trip when I would sit in Lucy long after sunset in well-populated campgrounds with other rigs lined up like sentinels. And I would turn everything off, lights, music, phone. I'd sit in the dark and wait, and sometimes I'd hear nothing, and that nothing would ache. Because once you've heard the knock, once you've stood in its shadow and returned alive, there's a part of you that stays curious, a part of you that wonders what would have happened if you'd opened the door. Just a crack, just enough to see. Because fear changes you. It makes you cautious, yes, but it also makes you hungry for understanding, for control, for closure. But there is no closure here, only echo, only aftermath. I remember driving through Nebraska 6 months after that last trip to the Badlands. It was supposed to be a supply run, just a few days, in and out. But on the second night, I took a wrong turn. Or at least, I thought it was wrong. But the road looked familiar. Worse, it felt familiar. The dust, the way the ridges crept out of the dark like buried bones, the faint scent of iron in the air. I pulled over. I didn't know why. I sat with the engine running. Lucy was humming low, the dashboard lights painting my hands red and green. I stared into the brush, and it was there. Not a figure this time, not a shape, but a sound. A soft, dragging rhythm, like someone pulling a heavy sack across gravel, and then the humming, that warbling, circular pitch, higher this time, almost sad. I should have driven off, floored it, got back on the highway and never looked back. But I didn't. I stepped outside, closed the door, and I listened. The humming stopped, the dragging stopped, but the air was wrong again, too thick, too quiet, too aware. And then something spoke, not out loud. Not in words, but in me. It felt like a memory that wasn't mine, like someone else's childhood flashing behind my eyes. A house with no doors, a mother with no face, a meal that tasted like sand. I fell to my knees. I couldn't breathe. And then it knocked again. On the ground, beneath me, like it was underneath the earth, waiting to be let out. I ran, got back in Lucy, drove all night westbound until the sun rose like blood across the windshield. I didn't stop for 2 states. And that's when I knew. It doesn't live in a place. It lives in moments. Moments when you're most vulnerable. Moments when you're searching for something. Healing. Peace. Silence. It finds you when you think you're safe, when you believe you've learned, when you let your guard down just enough for the door to crack open again. So now I live differently. I camp differently. No more remote pullouts, no more nights parked in unmarked spaces, no more chasing solitude for its own sake. I keep a list in my journal, safe zones, I call them. Campgrounds with people, light, noise. I keep Lucy tuned, I burn sage on the dashboard. I sleep with an iron crowbar beneath the bed and a ring of salt in the van's corners. Does it help? I don't know. But it reminds me that I'm still here, still choosing, still fighting. Because that's what this thing is. Not a monster, not a ghost, a test of who you are when the silence asks your name, a test of whether you'll listen or answer, whether you'll run or open the door. And maybe that's why I'm telling this now. Not to scare you, but to prepare you. Because if you camp long enough, travel far enough, and stay alone long enough in this country, you'll hear it too. That low hum under the wind, that shift in the shadows, that knock. Knock, knock, knock. It's not coming for blood. It's not coming to kill you. It's coming to see who you really are. So, when you park your Volkswagen van in some windswept patch of nowhere and the night turns still and the wind hushes down like it's listening, remember this. It doesn't start with screams. It starts with silence and ends with the choice to open the door or not. I didn't, and I still don't know if that saved me or damned me.